Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Yes, friends, you're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. This is your host, Critical Failure. Man, oh man, some stuff happened this past week. Dino Crisis came out of nowhere and is on sale on GOG. The Sims 1 and 2 are now on sale on Steam and other places. We're going to talk about a Resident Evil 0 remake, which is on the horizon. Steam is going to end support for Windows 10 in October, which is bananas. We're going to talk about Kinguin, right? That was asked last week and I never got around to it. What happens when you buy on a key for Steam off of Kinguin and what the risks are and why people don't like it. We're going to talk a little bit about C-Evo or Civo NG. I downloaded that and installed it and played it. We got a really good show. We're going to start things off with another album that I found on Bandcamp. And this one is from Novabit. It's called Chipwave Chronicles 2. And this is it's the soundtrack to a video game that doesn't exist, that kind of thing. But this is a long album, man. You're looking at 50 tracks, and there's some good stuff on here. And you can get it for free off of Bandcamp. So we're going to check out the title track number 1, Chipwave Chronicles 2, in parentheses, main title, because they really went out with the concept. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. More when we come back. There's talent there. You can't doubt that. All right. So that said, last week we did this thing where we had, we played an old soundtrack, and I kind of played it off and on throughout the show. And at the end, we revealed what it was. So we're going to do that again. So let's give this one a shot and see if you guys recognize it. What do you guys think? You know where that's from? Let's let it play a little longer. It's not a bad track, It's not quite, I wouldn't play it standalone as a chiptune, but it's not a bad track. We'll revisit that a little bit later on. Okay, I've had to rearrange things a little bit because there have been a couple, surprise things that happened this past week. We had 4 games released in digital distribution that blew my mind. Dino Crisis 1 and 2 came out on GOG and I had no idea that was going to happen. They just dropped, right? And also The Sims 1 and 2 both hit digital distribution on multiple platforms. They showed up on Steam. I know they're on Epic, and I think they might be on the Switch or something like that. I know they're on another store that I would never buy from. But that's 4 games. And Dino Crisis in particular. Okay, so I knew The Sims was coming. We talked about this. I think we touched on it briefly last week. I knew it was coming, but what I didn't know was that it was coming that fast. You usually get an announcement like this, especially from Electronic Arts. And it's like, oh, The Sims 1 and 2 is coming. We can look forward to that next summer or something. I don't know. I thought it was something that was still in the works. But no, it's here. Now, They are charging. Let's see. So the Sims 1 is $20 and the Sims 2 is $30. Everybody's excited about the Sims 1, and I bought the Sims 1. And the Sims 2 got a little bit of people were still excited about it, but less so. And I think the reason is because the Sims 1, the original Sims game, never hit digital distribution before, ever. So that's a big deal. The Sims 2 was given away for free on Origin, the EA store. You guys remember Origin when that was the thing? They gave it away for free for like a couple of days. It was one of those things where like click in and add it to your account and you get to keep it forever. And they did that, and then it disappeared. After a couple of days, when it wasn't free anymore, it just was gone from the store. You couldn't buy it. And that was like 10 years ago. So the reason I didn't pick up The Sims 2 right away is because technically I have it on Origin. It just means I'd have to go and relaunch Origin and stuff, so I haven't bought it yet. But I played The Sims 1, and I've only played The Sims 1, I think, one other time before. Weirdly enough, I remember like when I was a young kid being at like friends' houses and watching them play it. So it's kind of cool to have it myself. I was a little shocked by how much Comic Sans was in the game. If you've never played the original Sims, I don't think the font Comic Sans was a meme yet, because that is all over this game. It's everywhere, which is kind of hilarious. I've been into buying these big box PC games recently. Since I put up that video about getting the Wizardry Archives, right? That was a real moment for me, resolving an old issue from a lot of years ago. And when I originally bought that, when I was buying big box PC games, when they were still like on the shelves at GameStop, I remember when the original Sims came out, and my technique then was the same as it is now. A game would come out and I would let it sit for like 6 months to a year or so, and you'd see the price drop. It would always happen. It still happens. But for when the original Sims came out, the big box edition was $44.95 in my shop where I went, and I waited and waited and waited, and it never went down because it was still it remained a hugely popular game after its release for a long time. So because of that, because of the way I bought games, it was one I missed out on. So it's cool to finally have it. Also, I played it once, probably like 13 years ago or something. It was a long time ago. Remember how I said Sims 2 came out a long time ago? It was long before that even. I went through getting ISOs and actually burning them onto CDRs, and it was like a 3-part set, and so it was like the original Sims and all its expansion packs. And I tried it once, and I was like, oh, this is a lot. I wish I just had the base game. And then I sort of put it aside, and I still have those CDRs. So it's good to finally have the chance to like buy the game, so because it was one I like burned CDRs for. So now I've bought it and I have it legit, and I tried it a little bit, and it's pretty fun, I gotta say. It doesn't quite have the customizability as like the later games, of course, right? But you could tell like the Sims series, if you're into the Sims series, the magic was kind of already there from the beginning, even though it wasn't quite as refined. So that's pretty cool. We played a lot of SimCity 4 in my house years ago. That was a favorite for a very long time. Oddly enough, now that I think about it, that was first introduced to us by Triverse. You remember that guy who ran Scenic 7 PR? He's still around. I see him on Facebook. But he gave us a hard copy of SimCity 4, and my wife in particular just took to it, and we had a great time with that game for a very long time. The reason I bring it up is because SimCity 4 had interconnectivity between that game and The Sims 2, right? You'd build your city in SimCity 4, and you could import your city in The Sims 2 and use it to build the neighborhood. Somehow, to some limited capacity. I never did it personally, but I knew that they interconnected somehow. And since SimCity 4 was such a keystone game in my household for so long, although it's been a long time since we've been interested in it, it would be cool to like fire up The Sims 2 and like make them connect somehow. Because when I got The Sims 2 on Origin, I never quite did that. So that's cool. So if you're into The Sims or whatever, those are legit good games that you could buy. So now let's talk about Dino Crisis. Unlike the Sims stuff, Dino Crisis just happened. I was going to GOG for something completely unrelated, and I can't remember what I was going there for. It was like to download. I wanted to download the setup file for some game that I had. You know, I was working on my old computer or whatever, and I went there, and Dino Crisis 1 and 2 were all over the main page. And I was like, they want $10 a piece for each game. You can buy them together at a discount. It's like $17 if you buy them both in a package. And they're both out now. So they didn't do the thing that they did with Resident Evil, where they trickled the games out one every like 2 or 3 months. Just that here's the main page announcement. There's both the games you could buy, and they're both already out right now. So that was pretty cool. I bought those, and I installed Dino Crisis 1, and I started kicking around with it a little bit, just long enough to see like how the game setup is different. I probably played for like 10 minutes, but right out of the gate, I've got some difficulty options that I didn't have on the original PlayStation. I've got some, like you can choose Renee's outfit in the PC version. That's typically, you know, these old Capcom games, that's something that they set aside for people who beat the game many times, right? You beat the game. Resident Evil had this. You would beat the game and you'd get a key, and if you took the key to a special closet in a subsequent walkthrough, then you'd unlock outfits or something like that. Well, in the PC version of Dino Crisis, just right out of the gate, they're open and you can get them. So that's pretty cool. So Dino Crisis is a thing, and I'm so glad that it's available to pick up, and that's super awesome. GOG has just been on a tear lately, getting good games, you know, available for download that weren't previously.
All right, boys and girls, I wanted to follow up on something we talked about last week on the show, and it was in the email that Hemrock sent. He mentioned a game called C-Evo, or CEVO, as I have taken to referring to it. It's a freeware game that's designed to rebuild the Civilization experience, in a free setting. Not just freeware, but open source. Like, you can do whatever with it. And, as such, it's been remade a couple of times. So I downloaded CEVO-DH, and I can't remember what DH stands for. Something Horizons. But it is the latest build for a project that has changed hands a couple of times. And I played it a bit yesterday, and I took some notes about it because I thought it was really cool. It is not the only game that does this. There is another free Civilization game called FreeCiv that I've talked about before that is far more popular. FreeCiv is one you're going to find, like if you're a Linux user, there's my wife, FreeCiv is probably on the file repository or something somewhere. That's a more widely distributed game. So this one was new to me. So one thing that I heard in the wrap-up video was that there's no music in the game, which is true, and very few sound effects. That wasn't my experience. They didn't go overboard with the sound effects, but the sounds it's just fine. So it's definitely a quiet game by default. This was a game that I turned on. I turned on maximum rock and roll, and I had some music going, and that made it very, very playable. So just bear that in mind, that it is a quiet game as opposed to FreeCiv, which is not not that at all. The UI in C-Evo is miles ahead of FreeCiv, in my opinion. I actually re-downloaded FreeCiv and gave it a try immediately afterwards so I could compare the two. And FreeCiv is more advanced. There's cooler things it can do, I guess. But if you just want like a simple Civilization experience and you want it to be more resemblant of Civ 2, C-Evo seemed to be the way to go. Also, the setup was really easy. Some other things I noticed is that so some of this stuff, I don't know if this was specific to C-Evo or if some of this stuff was also part of Civ 2, and I just don't remember because Civ 3 has always been my game in that series. At first, I didn't feel the turns ticking by default, and that's because wait until end of turn was turned off by default, and I think that's true of Civilization 2 as well. So I had to turn that on, and then it felt a little bit more the way I was familiar. All right, there we go. And here's the big one that I noticed. Settlers don't build cities immediately, okay? You start with a city and a settler, And I moved the settler across several tiles, and I hit B to build a new city, and he starts like a construction site, and that took like 7 to 8 turns to turn into an actual city, as opposed to like Civ 3, and I think Civ 2 might be like this as well, where you have the settler, you press B, and there you go, that's a city. So that's a small change, but it has a pretty big effect on the expansion phase of civilization. Also, I noticed that there are no workers. The settlers themselves build enhancements like roads and irrigation. So if you start with a city right out of the gate, I imagine you use the other settler that you start with. A smart player would use that settler to, make some irrigation or whatever. Here's one that sucked. You can't rename cities, which is, a pain. When I play Civ 3, I usually like to rename all my cities to, really obscene things. And in this version of the game, it's just something I couldn't do. And lastly, they did fix the pathfinding, right? You right-click. When you're using a unit, you right-click, and that unit will start making its way over to wherever. But there is no auto-exploring, which kind of sucked. I don't know if there was auto-exploring in Civ 2, or maybe if there was, even if it was broken, but there isn't any auto-exploring. That means if you have 100 units and you want each unit to move somewhere, you better be laying in 100 courses. So there's a little bit more micromanaging on that front. There were some really cool things in the way cities are laid out, like when you're looking at the city view, which is usually a managerial screen with some heads that show you who you have allocated where. There's also like a little map of the city to show where all of your enhancements, like barracks, library, all that stuff, have been added, which I thought was a really neat touch. It's been a cool game to try out. So that was C-Evo and my experience with it. So there you go. And by default, of course, because it's a Civ 2 sort of game, it has it uses an isometric square map as opposed to like a hex map. If you try with Free Civ, you can play with either, but it defaults to a hex map. So when I tried Free Civ, it didn't immediately look like a classic Civilization experience. It looked more like a modern one. And then I had to mess with the settings, and I was able to make it a classic Civilization experience. So there you go. Both good games. But right now, I have a game in Free Civ where I'm playing as the Romans, and we're still sort of in the expansion phase. And I'm having a good time with it. So there you go. All right, we're almost at the 20-minute mark. We're about 18 minutes in, and usually at about 20 minutes, give or take, is where I like to thank the Patreon sponsors. This is a Patreon-sponsored program. These folks give their resources to make sure we can keep coming back every month, every week, whenever we can make it, and they are Darabka, Tecmoballs, and EmeraldRangers.com. Thank you guys so much. I hope you're enjoying the party. So there's a good portion of you out there who know full well what game this is from, and it's like killing you. And there's got to be a handful of people who would know, but just can't think of the name off the top of their head or can't quite place it. But this is a pretty memorable track. I feel like this is not one that would just slip into the cracks and be forgotten about. All right, let's play another real chiptune. Let's go back to that album, the Chipwave Chronicles. Okay, let's talk about Kinguin, because last week Hemrock asked about this in his email, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to circle back to it. And it occurred to me as soon as I went off the air that I never did. Okay. I took some notes on this. Okay, here we go. So there's 3 types of things that you can get off of Kinguin, and I think this is true of all of the like key sites like G2A or whatever. 3 things: keys, Steam accounts, and Steam gifts. Keys are transferable entities. Steam accounts and Steam gifts are not. So the most commonly asked question when it comes to buying a key is my account safe? And I hear a lot of people, oh, you could get your account banned or something like that. No, if you're buying a key, nothing is going to happen to your account. The worst thing that's going to happen if you buy a key and the deal goes south is the key won't activate and you'll be screwed, or whoever paid for the key originally, if their payment falls through or gets rolled back or back charged or whatever, then they'll actually deactivate the game from your Steam account. Nothing will happen to your Steam account if you're buying keys. Now, Steam gifts are non-transferable, so they do sell them on Steam, but that's the kind of thing where your account could get into trouble. I've bought a ton of keys off of Kinguin, and I've never had any trouble with my personal account because I never buy gifts and I never buy Steam accounts. I don't know why you would buy an entire Steam account for a single game, but that is a thing you can buy. All right, now let's talk about the risk involved with buying the keys. So now that you know that the keys are safe for your account, the keys themselves sometimes have issues. Always buy low-cost keys, in my opinion, because I've had a number of times where I've bought a key and either the key just didn't activate or I opened it up and there was no key inside. So buy low-cost keys, and the percentage of time that happens is like 1 in 30. So it's pretty rare, but it does happen. Once the game gets added to your account, I've only actually had a game removed from my Steam account that I successfully added one time. And this is out of, I don't know how many keys, a ton. And that game that I added was Shenmue 3, which I got for $1.50. Excuse me. And then the game was removed. They said there was a problem with payment, and they removed the game. And I added another copy back for another $1.50, and it was fine. So it's been quite a while, and the game doesn't seem to be getting removed anymore, and I still haven't played it. So there you go. Now, bear that in mind. The reason why I say watch how much you're spending is because it's common practice for people to sell games, like keys for games that are no longer for sale on Steam, and those keys can get pretty expensive. I did this once. There's a game called Droplets, spelled with a Z. It's a little puzzle game that I have on my Steam account that I got from like a holiday sale, 10 plus years ago, and my kids really like it. So at one point I ponied up and got a key for it for my son's account. Now it's been off of Steam for a long time, but it's also a really obscure game. So I think I paid like $19 or something like that for that particular key. But high profile games, when they go off of Steam, the keys just go through the roof, and it's not a safe thing to do. I've got a key in my personal key, like text file. I've got keys for Grand Theft Auto and Grand Theft Auto Vice City, because there was actually a GTA Humble Bundle like many, many years ago. And I only bought it so that I could get San Andreas. So the other games I just held onto the keys, and they have become my most valuable keys. Those were legally obtained, and I guarantee you they still work. But I don't want to sell them on a Kinguin site, because even though I think Vice City is like $200 or something now if you want to get that copy, or something crazy like that, I don't want to do it because there's no, I could sell it, the guy could buy it, and then I find out, as it turns out, there was some sort of problem with the key, and that guy's out a bunch of money, and it's bad for my reputation or whatever, or maybe I would get away with it and scot free, and I just ripped off some dude for $200, and I just don't want to do that. So, so there you go. So let's talk about where the keys come from. And the reason why developers don't like these types of sites, well, the basic concept is that the developers either have already been paid for the keys or they issued the keys themselves. So one problem is that they issue a bunch of like review copies, and then people take the keys that they're given as review copies and they sell them on Kinguin, right? So that's unethical. It's unfortunately legal, but it's unethical. So that's one reason why developers hate it. Another problem is that games that show up on bundles a lot, those people tend to have extra keys for games like that. Those types of keys get sold, and that devalues the game. And so certain games, especially older ones, you have these situations where they cost whatever they cost on Steam, but then you look at the keys, and the keys are like way less than they should be. A perfect example is this. There's a turn-based wrestling game. Hold on a second. I want to look this up because it's worth looking up. Yeah, here we go. There's a game that I really enjoy called Wrestling Spirit 3. Wrestling Spirit 3 is a turn-based wrestling game. It has mostly negative reviews on Steam, which I think is baloney because I think it's an awesome game. Here's the thing. Steam sells the game for $20, $19.99. The key, if you buy it off of Kinguin, is 60 cents. So you can see that huge price disparity. How did this happen? It happened because the developer, Grey Dog Software, went through a publisher, and the publisher just like didn't take care of them. So Grey Dog Software has since pulled out of Steam, and they don't sell any of their games on Steam anymore. But the ones that they dealt with a publisher on, they don't have the ability to pull, and that's why Wrestling Spirit 3 is just up there, you know. So that's one example, and I think Project Zomboid is a similar kind of thing, which is why you can get that for $6, and the regular game is what, 20, 25, something like that. A couple other issues. Sometimes I've heard stories that people will like steal credit cards and then use the key economy to like launder the money, right? Buy games or keys with stolen credit cards and sell them on Kinguin, and that's another reason why they go cheap. So I don't know. I haven't seen any data to back that up, but that's something I've heard about for a long time. And lastly, stay away from the game Heartbound, specifically Heartbound, because the developer Thor, who is a prominent figure on Twitch and YouTube or whatever, he doesn't sell keys on key sites or on like Humble Bundle or whatever. What he does is he'll give out keys as review copies, and then a week later he'll deactivate all those keys. And he does that so that the people will sell the keys on key sites, and then when you buy them, the game gets removed like a week later. So he does it to troll the entire key economy, which is really hilarious. But just don't buy that particular game. It goes on sale for $10, so I was able to get it anyway. But there you go. I am down for using key sites as long as the game is less than $10, and as long as it is a key, and as long as it's activatable in North America, because there's some keys that are Europe only. And there you go. That's my explanation of Kinguin and its ilk.
All right, where are we at now? 30 minutes in. Okay, so let's go over... I got a few bullet points on my notes here that I haven't read through, and I think it's worth mentioning. So EA's stock price made headlines, and I don't think this is something that really affects the average gamer, but it made headlines, and it definitely caught my attention. There was a huge drop in price, 19% on a single day. The EA stock plummeted, and most people who've been playing games... if you're interested in video games enough that you're listening to this, then you're probably familiar with EA being the villain for a lot of years. So we were just like, of course, eventually it's going to... but it really dropped, and it didn't correct. Like, you see sometimes irregularities in stock prices, and then they'll correct to a certain amount. Stocks go up, stocks go down. But I looked at the stock price like 2 or 3 days after this happened, and it definitely did not correct. So give me a second. EA stock prices. Stock price. Okay, so right now it's the stock price for Electronic Arts is at $122.91. And I think before this happened, it was like $250. Yes, I'm looking at the 1 month, and it was around $150 or so. And then on the 22nd of January, it just folded hard, and now it's starting to swing up a little bit, but not nearly to what it was. So I don't think this translates a whole lot to the average gamer, but EA has stuck us all for something at some point in our lives. At some point you bought some game from EA and it was a trash heap, because they've done this so many times over the years. Or maybe they've closed online services for a game that you enjoyed, something like that, because goodness knows that's happened a ton. So maybe we can just have this little bit of vindication when it comes to our relationship with Electronic Arts, and for that reason alone, I wanted to read it. Moving on, we have something that is going to affect the average gamer a lot more. Steam. You guys know Steam? Golly, I love Steam. I've said a lot of good things about Steam over the years. Now Steam is doing something really irritating. They're going to end support for Windows 10 on October 14th, 2025. Not Windows XP, not Windows 7, Windows 10. This is I am baffled. Many people are still using Windows 10. Please don't do this. Why are you doing this? So that's a thing. I don't know what else to say about that, except if you're not using Windows 11, then either plan on switching platforms or plan on switching operating systems. Which is, it hurts to say, this is Steam being the bad guys. Steam is not a publicly traded company. It's just Steam, right? They don't have shareholders that they have to please. So because of that, they don't have to focus on constant price growth, stock price growth, the same way companies like EA do, and that enables them to do a lot more like pro consumer things that other companies just can't do, because they wouldn't be able to go to shareholders and say, okay, we got a little bit of a drop now, but ultimately it's going to be good. No, because of that, we usually don't see this kind of thing from them. I know that they've been ending support for older platforms, right? Hemrock has talked about that. Windows XP, first it was Windows XP and Windows 7, and then here we are. So I've always championed getting games on Steam I have elsewhere. Hell, I talked about it on this episode. I talked about getting Sims 2 at some point on Steam when I already had it on Origin. I don't know if I'm still going to do that. I probably will, I don't know. But yeah, I've been more open to GOG after this week. Because on one hand, you got Dino Crisis coming out on GOG. They're on a tear. They're on a really hot streak. Steam is adding support for Windows 10. They're not looking good right now. So we'll see. I don't know. Keep your eyes open, boys. Keep your eyes open. Keep your portfolios diversified, I guess. I caught wind of a remake for Resident Evil 0 in the works. It's not officially announced. It's very much in development, but Game Rant has an article on it, and there was a leak, and it is happening, and it fits with the release schedule that Resident Evil has had over the past few years. Resident Evil. If I type in Resident Evil on Steam, how many Resident Evil titles do I actually have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 games on Steam, plus 3 more on GOG. 14, 15, 16, 17, 17 games. They're releasing a game every year and have been for decades at this point. Resident Evil is the spooky version of Call of Duty at this point. And in the past several years, it's been a mainline game and then a remake game, and then a mainline game and then a remake game, right? Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil 3 remake, and whatever. So here we are. That looks like it's what's coming. I think Resident Evil 0, if you've never played it, it was a GameCube game. It was a follow-up to the Resident Evil remake we got back on the GameCube, and before being on GameCube, it was a canceled game for the Nintendo 64, which is why it has the name that it has. And it's a pretty good game. It's okay. It has the distinction of following one of the greatest in the series, and that consequently, I think it gets overlooked a lot because of that. But you can get the original Resident Evil 0. You can get that on Steam. I feel like, for very cheap. I think the regular price is $20, which is too much, but it goes on sale all the time. It's on sale now for $5. It is a really solid way to spend $5 if you've never played it. I've got high apple pie in the sky hopes for a Resident Evil 0 remake. We'll see how that goes. And the last thing I got on my list is I'll read it verbatim. Found old Minecraft levels: Mushroom Kingdom, New World, my actual first world, and Coxville, which is a world I built with Dorabka, and we had a channel for it and everything 13 years ago. I found these 3 old worlds on my old computer, and they were done in like Minecraft beta or so around that time. Hemrock, we played as well, the Mushroom Kingdom world. That's the one Hemrock and I played, late nights in 2011 or 2010 or something, whenever it was. So I'm looking forward to digging up an old version of Minecraft to try and get those running again, and making a couple of videos for it. They were, it's good stuff. They were from an era when, if you followed independent gaming, Minecraft was in the news like every other day, and it was just such and such a person built this thing in Minecraft, such and such a person built this thing in Minecraft, look what you can do in Minecraft. It was when Minecraft was really everywhere in a way that it just isn't now. Like, I get it that it's still kind of ubiquitous and it's one of the most sold games ever, and you're going to know what it is, but it still was absolutely everywhere in those days. So I'm looking forward to checking those old worlds out and whatnot. Let's see. Some trouble installing CD-ROM games. I don't know if this is actually notes for the show, but old PC games that I have CD-ROMs that I picked up. Not all of them are installing, and one particular that I was excited about was the original Panzer General, which is a hexagonal World War II based turn-based war game. That didn't install, and that was a big bummer. Because that one is the one and only game in that entire series that's not available on for sale digitally, because Ubisoft has the rights. So since that happened, I looked around and I found there is an open source free game, just like we talked about CEVO for to play Civilization 2. Right? We have CEVO, which is a free game that's like it. There's a similar thing like that for Panzer General, and it's called Open General. And I downloaded Open General, and I installed it, and I played it several times this past week, and it was really good. It was exactly what I would expect from a Panzer General game. A lot of hexes, a lot of numbers, a lot of static images of army and units and military units, and you can do clicking, and you can do you can make them go boom, and I very much enjoyed it. So yeah, so that was a thing. I don't know if I have any awesome stories about playing Open General that I can share at this point, but if you like hex-based war games, and I kind of always have, I've got a little file of them on Steam, right? Some good ones that are on the market. This is a really solid one, and it is really free. I looked this up, and this comes just on the tail end of playing CEVO, right? So I was like, man, that's 2 really awesome games that will have the potential to you can deep dive into these and have a lot of fun. And so I just opened up a random Google search and I was like, hey man, what are some other open source games that are out there? And I was kind of shocked because there's a lot now. And some of them, I think I remember like Hemrock telling me about in the past, because the first thing that comes up is a game called 0AD. And I know Hemrock made me aware of this when I was in my Linux days, which is like, Google says it's a 3D RTS similar to Age of Empires 2. And I never played Age of Empires 2, which is probably why I didn't lock on it. But that's one game in a long list. So I would love to try out more of these. Open City, a free and open source software 3D city building game, started in 2003 by France-based Vietnamese programmer Dung Can Yen. Open City, that looks really great. What was the other one I really wanted to try that was like Command and Conquer? Open RA, I think it's called. Yeah, Open RA, as in Open Red Alert, right? Command and Conquer. I'll just have to get that track, the opening track from Red Alert, and then play it over top of it, because a lot of these games don't have music. It's funny. I played Civo, and that's the big thing about Civo is it doesn't have any music to it. And then I played Open General. And not only does Open General have music, but it had issues with the music overlapping each other, where at one point I had two separate background tracks just playing at the same time. And I was like, do I have the instance of the game open twice? No, it just was weird. What are you going to do? UFO Alien Invasion. It's a strategy video game when the player fights aliens trying to come to Earth. It's heavily influenced by XCOM. I'm down. I'd give it a try. I don't know about this list, though. I asked it about open source games, and I see games on this list that definitely are not free. Tales of Maj'Al, that's definitely a Steam game that they want $20 for. So we'll see. I'm going to do some more research on this, and then hopefully in weeks to come, I'll be able to tell you about some other free games that you can nab for yourself in case Steam goes crazy and decides to end support for Windows 11 2 months after it ends support for Windows 10. All right, boys and girls, let's take a look in the fail bag, and then we'll return to our secret track. So for the fail bag this week, I went over to emeraldrangers.com, where last week's episode was posted. And hang on a second. I had this open a second ago. Where'd it go? There we go. I've got a couple of articles on emeraldrangers.com, including two guys in hats. MMPR Vlog Calamity. And there's TCR for last week. GTA 6 might be $100, and no comments on that one. All right. Well, let's head over to YouTube and see what we got. Desm101 writes, congrats on your anniversary. It's good to see Evercade last this long as a legit way to buy older games on new carts. I've yet to get one. The Duke Nukem console looks cool. Too bad they're jacking up the prices, though. Very cool to hear that extended shout-out from Uncle Derek, a.k.a. Stop Skeletons. Yeah, I checked out Derek again after last week, and I rewatched some of his old videos, and I just checked out what he's doing. He's got some, he's got some decent stuff still, which is surprising because, man, here's a guy who's been doing it a long, long time, and he hasn't aged much either. So hats off to him. Apparently, I think Hemrock mentioned this. He's right. The new stuff, the new Stop Skeletons from Fighting or whatever, goes up on Patreon behind a paywall, but it does eventually make it to YouTube, so you can still follow him, I guess. I still found stuff to watch just clicking around, so it was cool to see him still at it and still, healthy and whatnot. Like he hasn't had some big catastrophe or anything like that. I miss Starship Amazing, though. They made some good music, in my opinion. Thanks for the holler, man. I hope you're doing well, and I think that may be it. I didn't get. Let me see. Let me take a look at the YouTube studio. I always get sidetracked every time I try and open YouTube to look at comments and whatnot. It just ends up being a catastrophe. A few smattered things from videos here and there, but yeah, that's about it. One thing is here. Okay, so 12 days ago, I got one on a video I made about a cheap Evercade knockoff, cheap EverDrive knockoff. Now you might remember this. At one point, I bought an EverDrive for the Sega Genesis, a see-through blue one, and I got it off of AliExpress for $20, and it showed up and it didn't work. I knew it wasn't going to work, but I just wanted to show off, hey, this is what you get when you buy one of these cheap EverDrives for $20 instead of $100. And I still get people tell me it's not working for this reason, it's not working for that reason. It's not working because it's a cheap $20 knockoff and not a real EverDrive. I was actually sent, was it Desm who sent me this? I feel terrible for not remembering. I think it was Desm. Who sent me an actual EverDrive that works just great. So I have one that works, but people still theorize why this one doesn't work. The latest one was finally does these flash carts, the OG EverDrive included, damage the console? I read somewhere the console uses 5 volts, and the chips inside these use 3.3 volts and are overheating due to some excessive power draw. Not sure, just asking. I don't know either, man. I don't know either. I'm sorry. Like, I've also heard that there's like voltage differences, and they stress capacitors and stuff, you know. But there's no real way for me to, you know. There's no hard data where it's like they're measuring amperage on various components. I guess that'd be a really good video if an electrician wanted to test some of these things. But I'll say they said the same thing about CDRs on the Dreamcast. If you burn games on your Dreamcast, eventually it'll wear out your Dreamcast. I got my Dreamcast used more than 10 years ago, you know, and it still kicks. But that's anecdotal evidence. So truth be told, I do not know. But best of luck, man. I hope it all goes well for you. All right, let's go back to our mystery track. Do you know it? Do you know it already? This is your last chance. Well, clearly it's a Super Nintendo game, because you know, Super Nintendo had that orchestra synthesis that no other system did quite the same. All right, let's play the title screen music. What about now? Do you know now? Just wait for the drop. Hang on. There you go. So that's SimCity for Super Nintendo, which again was a favorite in my house. So my wife used to play this game, and she would start cities over and over again. So she didn't have like a long running save file that she kept going back to. She would start a new city and then race it, start a new one, and race it, and start a new one. And I just remember having dinner. This is before we had kids. We'd have dinner, and she'd have SimCity for the Super Nintendo on in the background. Because the Super Nintendo version, if you remember, if you sped it all the way up to the highest speed, it still didn't go that fast. It still took like 3 to 5 minutes to get through a year. Whereas like on the PC, if you sped it up all the way, it was like New Year, New Year, New Year, New Year. And it was kind of hard to slow it down again. Super Nintendo didn't have that. So if you wanted time to pass so you could get money again, you had to just sit and wait. And I remember she used to do that quite a bit. So special memories attached to this one. And it's a really good pick for all you emulation handheld owners out there. And with that, boys and girls, you know what time it is. Thank you for spending some time listening to some chiptunes, talking some video games, and just hanging out, having some fun. I'm really glad that TCR is back on the air. I enjoy doing this. And, you know, I hope you have something out there that you're digging as well. And as we move into this next week, you know, I can't promise that things are going to go good, but I can promise your best shot is to keep getting up in the morning and putting those shoes on and doing the best you can. And I'm rooting for you. I really am. I mean that. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you next week.